Ron Bechet.
Bechet, okay.
Yeah.
Struggle with these names.
Yeah, it's always a struggle, especially here in New Orleans, because it's passed down, and as it passed down, it's like that old thing. You tell someone, and someone tells someone, and by the time it comes back to you, it's completely different. And so through the generations, it's changed. So
our understanding from some of the other interviews we've had is that there are a lot of folks have moved to New Orleans after Katrina. Do you have any sense of how that's affected the culture, or is it affecting the culture, contributing, negating, however effect it might have?
yeah, it is changing, and some of it is changing for the better. Some of it, for my belief too, is some of it is not. But any culture must change in order to survive. If it stays the same or stagnant, then, and the generations that come in don't have an opportunity to put their own stamp on it, then it dies. And so I think some of it is that, the new generations that are coming up are actually putting their understanding of what they see as humanity on it, and it's changing. Some of those things are good, and some of those things old folks like me think are not so good. But it's, I think, going to bear out over the long term, and we don't know what that's going to look like later on down the line. And I think, for example, second lines, Mardi Gras Indians themselves, they're all cultures that have evolved to where we know them now from the past. And one example might be with Tootie Montana. He's said to have changed the Mardi Gras Indian culture from actually fighting and competing in that way to competing in a way where they actually decide on who's the best looking, who's the prettiest Mardi Gras Indian. Who's the one who has the most skill, rather than the one who can literally fight the best. And so I think that's a positive cultural change. But we'll see as we go through how those changes still take effect in the new generations.
What would you want people who aren't from New Orleans to know about education in New Orleans, and then also maybe the connections to Xavier?
Yeah. Well, we've, my children, my daughter was in high school in 2005. And just before then, in 2004, we had the state takeover of New Orleans schools, which was called the RSD. And the RSD came in and took over through legislation those schools that were failing. And so when Katrina came, they were able literally to fire all the teachers across the Orleans Parish. And still there has been no, how should we say, they were career teachers. There's been no reconciliation, there's been no understanding of what actually happened with that. And so today we have a sort of interesting mix of things that happen in K through 12 in New Orleans. And we have different, these sort of organizations that come in, these educational organizations that come in and run particular schools by charter, either through the state system, the RSD system. The Recovery School District is actually what that stands for. Yeah. And then we also have those that are chartered by our Orleans Parish School Board. And so we have a mix of chartered schools. And some are okay, and some are just absolutely horrible. And so there's no continuity for young people. And so first you have this trauma that happens, and then you build on that trauma by not having any stability for these students. And so this continuation of this trauma is actually showing up now. It's showing up here when they come to university, or if they can make it to university. And that trauma has not been dealt with. And so we have all of these young people who basically are dealing with this trauma however they can. And of course, it's showing up in ways that are not very healthy for our society and our culture. We see them in the criminal justice system. And, you know, New Orleans, this area of the country, and we see it we call it Louisiana, but most of the people come from this area that end up in the criminal district, in the criminal justice system, has the highest incarceration rate of anywhere in the world. And so we are not doing something right. And we're criminalizing in as early on as school. So we have, you know, 6 and 7-year-olds that are being arrested, you know, in schools for basically kid-type behavior. And we have no way of dealing with it in a consistent way. So those teachers who knew how to deal with that, who knew how to deal with kid behavior, are gone now. You know, we have no really career teachers anymore in the school system, from what I can see. They come and they go. So we have young people who are basically teaching young people who have no experience at teaching. And so teaching has not become a career, it's become a job. And unfortunately, it's really starting to show up. And I guess this is one of my pet peeves about how we treat young people in the school system.
Is there anything you haven't said that you would want people who are not from New Orleans or who have never been to New Orleans to know about this geographic location?
Yeah, it's, I don't know how to say it other than New Orleans is more than just the French Quarter. And it's more than just, you know, partying on Bourbon Street. And as a matter of fact, you ask, I think most people who are from New Orleans, they don't even deal with Bourbon Street. There's just so much of it. You mentioned Gentilly, you know, there's so many beautiful things, areas, places, significant ways of thinking about living in New Orleans that I think are special. And I think we sort of get categorized in Bourbon Street and Mardi Gras. And there's so much more than that, that this place is a very spiritual place. It's a place of a very special history, and something that I think that has a contribution to make to this country and needs to be brought to the light about ways that we've been able to manage and live in this place. And I think it's a good lesson for the rest of the country in some ways. And we do have a whole lot of problems that particularly around, you know, we talked about education, we talked about the fact that, you know, we incarcerate more people than any place in the world, particularly black males. But I think that, you know, there's some things that we have to work on and learn from that are things that can be translated to the rest of the country.